This is the theme of Setback, an interview with the Hitman, Victor's background, select frames. So this is where Victor is talking about, let's start from the beginning. And so we are returning in the film to Romania, and is represent the slums. We can look at this and tell that this is not a higher level expensive area, but it's home to Victor and his friends. And so we get a sense of this. Clothes are hanging outside of the windows. The building is not as freshly painted as it could be, and mainly older people living here, as well as families. And so now we see Victor as a child, right off to the right frame, and then we see all his friends. So these are the four friends. This is Victor and his three friends. One of them is Alexei, another is Marku, and another is Cesar. And Cesar is the one he's going to end up shooting, because Cesar is sent to kill Victor later. Marku is the one who actually does not get into the mob enforcing business, right? And he marries, he sort of gets fat, has children. And then Alexei is a one that he was going to shoot, because he found Alexei is the one who sold him out, right? When in reality, it was actually Bethesda who set them up to sell him out, to sell Victor out. But Alexei is the one he's going to let go, so that lets you know that later he has a change of heart. But these are the three friends with Victor out to the right frame here in the yellow shirt. So these two neighborhood bullies come to attack Victor because he owes him some money. So in the same way that Victor borrows from, say, these bullies who actually work with the mob as well, the mafia as well, his father does the same thing, and we're going to see that later. So Victor is resolute in his face. He knows what they are after, and he sort of, prepares himself to be attacked, because he knows he's going to be attacked. And I noticed that he has a habit of lowering his head as a child. So he does this a lot throughout this part of his part in the film. He doesn't go all the way to the end until Victor has flashbacks of his childhood, but essentially we see him throughout the film with his head lowered, and we see these two older guys approaching him. And so one of the guys attacks him. Victor sort of pushes him away, and then he attacks him again, and then he takes him to the ground. And it's interesting how when you are within a certain economically depressed area, how you all fight against each other. And I never could really understand that, how when you live in the slums or the ghettos or any of the types of areas that do not have a lot of economic advantages and people are just living paycheck to paycheck, why would you really fight each other? I mean, you look exactly the same. I would think you would fight the people who don't look like you. Of course, I understand why. I'm not naive. I understand that you don't fight the system, or you don't fight the people who basically hold you economically hostage. It's not like you can go and fight the rich man. The rich man has resources, has he donates to the police unions. He may have some police officers in pocket. So you can't really do that, because they can shoot you. But I never quite understand why you could fix your mind to hit somebody who looks exactly like you. I understand this older boy wanting his money, and that Victor borrowed some money from him, and now Victor cannot pay him back. I get that. And why would he need to borrow money anyway? That's another question to think about. But I just never quite understood how people within the same area who look exactly the same would fight each other. And I could just be naive, but I always thought about that. And so he is also determined in his goal to sort of uh, get Victor to pay him back his money. And remember, don't forget these two guys. These are the two guys who are going to bow their head to Victor later when Victor decides to join the mob as a child, and he becomes a major enforcer even just as a child. When he goes to enforce um, um, money from a person who borrowed money from the mob, the mafia, these two guys are going to stop and lower their heads. So, it's interesting how that transitions. We see Victor lowering his head and sort of in, I don't know, maybe some shame or fake shame. And the guys, their head is raised, right, because they have the power. Victor doesn't have power, but then when he goes and seeks power by becoming a child mob enforcer, he's the one who has power. Sergey puts him in charge, and these two guys that you see are going to be the ones who lower their heads. And so this is one of the bullies sort of really going in on Victor to the point that it's almost like he's choking him. And then this kid here is the one who calls out and tells Victor that he needs to come inside or something like that. I don't remember him being a brother to Victor because we don't see him later other than him being on this balcony. But something about him breaks up the fight between Victor and the bully, and Victor has to return to the home. And so Victor is laying on the ground. He's actually going to kick the guy. So there's some kind of fight in Victor. It's, kind of misguided, of course, but there is some kind of fight in Victor because I would think I wouldn't kick a guy who just took me down to the ground, but there's something in him that still wants to fight back. And that's in contrast to his own mother, who doesn't fight back. Victor is position on the ground, so that's that feeling of being sort of pushed down and having to find your way to get up. And I think when Victor decides to become a mob enforcer as a child, I think this is the image that he has in his head of being down, especially when he sees his father being attacked by Sergey and thinking to himself, I don't want to become my father. But this whole idea of being vulnerable, he's vulnerable here because the bullies could come back anytime, but he's vulnerable here and he's got to find a way to pull himself up. And that's when he makes a decision after seeing his father beat up and everything. He makes a decision to pull himself up. And pulling himself up in this kind of environment is no different than pulling himself by the bootstraps, right? It's not a legal way to do it. It's a criminal way to go, but he feels like he has no choice. And choice is very interesting that I didn't think about, because all of the people who betray Victor, as I noted earlier, say they didn't have a choice, right? And many of the young guys who join the mafia or the mobs basically suggest that they don't have a choice. But we do know that there is a character in this film, Marco, we'll see him later, who chooses not to join the mob. Now, Cesar says that Marco is mother fucked, right? That his life is so lower than a mob enforcer, that he's fat and got a wife and he looks horrible. And he does that. We will see Marco later. He doesn't look like a person who's fresh. He looked like he let himself go. It looks like he let his surroundings affect him, right, in a negative way. But That's in contrast. Him seeing everyone else saying they didn't have a choice and they had to choose to go this route is in contrast to Marku saying he didn't. Marku hasn't had to kill anybody. He hasn't had to go on assignment as a mob enforcer. And so and the people who chose to become mob enforcers towards the end of the film are saying they want to get out. So that lets you know that they really did not want to get in. And, instead of going to school, he chooses to become a mob enforcer. So him being on the ground, feeling powerless, vulnerable, not wanting to become his father, as we're going to see, is sort of the reasoning that he uses in making the choices that he makes. So this is his father. This guy behind him is not Sergey. He's just probably like a foot soldier type person. And Trafficant, who is a mob boss, is going to talk about Sergey being just a foot soldier and how it was easy to get him to sort of kill or attempt to kill Viktor, right? He's just a foot soldier. He does what he is told. So the father here, this is Viktor's father. He owes the mob some money. And so these are, like your enforcers trying to take him down. And this is Viktor standing behind the door. And this is where I say that the door aspect of this film is very interesting, because while Viktor is watching his father be attacked, there's nothing on the inside of Viktor that runs and opens the door and maybe jumps on one of the guys and says, don't hit my father, don't touch my father. His hand is on the door, is on the door handle. He can open it at any time, but he's choosing not to open that door. I don't think that the guys who are attacking the father, sure, they would hit Viktor and knock him down, but I don't think they would take a gun, at least not at this point, right? Because they want the money. But it's interesting that he doesn't walk through that door. He doesn't, there's nothing in him. And when we talk about attachment theory, Viktor really suffers from an insecure attachment. Nothing that he does, he doesn't have a firm attachment to his family, his mother and father. And so he doesn't feel like the need to come to their rescue of any sort. Even when he becomes a mob enforcer, he doesn't actually try to protect his family, right? But I thought it was interesting, and I didn't catch this until maybe the third time I watched the movie, that he's standing at the door, that he's making a choice to not intervene, that he is, suggesting to the viewing audience, this is not my problem. And he's going to say that to Sergey when he decides to become a mob enforcer as a child. And Sergey asks, so are you here to pay your father's debt? And Viktor says no. And Sergey says, why? Because it's not my debt. And so I thought that was interesting. If all of us actually had that attitude as grown adults, we will probably not get into a lot of the issues that we get into in helping people. But here, he's not going to help him. He has the power right now in that hand on the door to help his father, and he's not going to do it. Here we have Viktor's mother and then his father's wife intervening. And even when we see her trying to fight for her husband, who owes money to the mob, Viktor still never comes and tries to rescue her, right? This man here hits the mother in the face, and she turns around and falls down. And we don't see the husband actually hitting the guy who just hit his wife either. Remember that the women in the film are not women who are protected. They're not covered. They may have a husband, but that husband's voice is much louder in the film, even if the husband ends up being assassinated himself because he owes money to Sergey. But I just really think it's interesting how Viktor as a child, and Viktor is powerless. I do understand that he's powerless, but like I said, there's nothing on the inside of Viktor that runs through the door and says, don't hit my mother, don't hit my father, right? That basically everyone is in this thing individually and by themselves. Sure, we live in an apartment together, but we are not really here to take care of each other. However, the women in the film, except for Bethesda, this woman here, this mother here, and then the mother that Viktor kills as a child, while he is a child, they intervene. They say something. They try to help their husbands, even if their husbands are just do not have the character enough to try to help their own spouses. But he's going to hit her here, and she's going to flip around and fall on the ground, and then the father is also going to fall on the ground. But again, there's nothing on the inside of him. There's nothing that pulls at him emotionally that says, don't hit my wife, right? So she falls, he hits her, she falls, he falls down as well. Viktor is still in the background on the other side of the door protecting himself. And then Sergey comes in. He is the one who owes, the father owes the money to. And the mother is somewhat off the ground, right? Looking at the two men. And then the father is just, he acts like he is so helpless, that he can't do anything. He has a lot of height on Sergey and the other guy. He has a lot of, he's thicker than him, but somehow he is so vulnerable. He's so victim-like, Viktor has more fight in him when the two bullies take him to the ground and then they get up and about to walk away. Viktor is the one who kicks the guy in the leg. He has more fight in him as a child than his father has in him right now. So then you think about his narrative history. Where did he stop? Where did he stop fighting? Has he ever been a person who fought at all? Did he see his parents? Did he see his own father beat his mother, right? What is his narrative history? Because this is a setback for him. We are flashing, well, we're not flashing back. We are basically, the writer-director has now positioned us to see what Viktor's background was like, his toxic environment. So this is Viktor's memory of what he had to endure as a child. But we don't get the father, talking about his father. We don't get a narrative history about the father. So we just have to assume that he had some of the same issues in his childhood, because you do what you know. You do what you've seen. In the same way that the woman is afraid here and she was hit, she's used to being hit. Her own husband, who's on the ground, hits her all the time. He's always beating on her. He takes a belt to her. When Viktor flashes back to his childhood just before he decides to help Bethesda, we see the father taking a belt to the mother's back, and her back is bloodied, right? Viktor doesn't come in and try to help her and try to stitch her up or anything like that, or put even a cover on her. But they each have narrative history. Sergey has a narrative history. The guy next to him has a narrative history. But it's interesting how the writer-director plots this setback in a sense that Viktor is confronted with a decision and he doesn't take a decision. And then his father is confronted with the decision and he can't make a decision because he doesn't have the money to pay. The mother is confronted with a decision to try to help the father, but she's helpless because she doesn't have the money to pay. And Sergey is confronted with a decision that he's going to have to make because he can't pay. And he's the one who says that if you don't pay me my money, I'm going to put your wife to work. And that shocks her, because when you're putting a woman to work in this environment, knowing that there's a mafia as well, they all know what that basically means. So Sergey is sort of impatient here. This is Sergey who's going to become Viktor's mentor. So we get a pretty good image of him. And so when I said that he had height on them, he has height on them. Look at him and look at Viktor's father in terms of, in contrast to Sergey here. Sergey has a lot of power and he has a lot of weight to his authority, but this father definitely has some kind of height to him, that he has some kind of advantage, but he's stuck in his mind that he can't do anything other than listen to this man tell him that that you owe me money and I want my money. And so he hits him in the stomach. And the wife is still screaming out, as all women do in these abusive situations. And this is where Sergey says that if you don't give me my money, you see him pointing at the wife. If you don't give me my money, if you don't have my money, I'm going to put your wife to work. And she's shocked by that statement. You know, it's interesting how it's probably common knowledge in this slum that women have to be put to work if their men can't pay, but it's still a shocking thing when someone says it. And Sergey is not, the father is not really all that concerned about it. He's just looking at Sergey as understanding what's going to end up happening. And again, Viktor is still behind the door. He has taken his hand off the handle where we saw him before. His hand was on the handle to come in, to go through that door. But here he is not interested in going through that door. He's watching the events unfold as if he's watching TV. And I don't remember them having a television in the apartment, but he's watching this as if he's watching television, as if he's watching something that he might see on a cop drama, or something like that. But he's not, but he has made up in his mind that he's not walking through that door. Now, we don't know what his narrative history is in terms of engaging a situation like this. This may not have been the first time, and we have to assume that it's not, because the father is an abuser. So we have to assume that it's not. But regardless, he's not walking through that door. So when they finally leave, Sergey did see Viktor standing behind the door, and so he went on ahead and left with the other guy. And so once Sergey and the other guy leave, Viktor then opens the door. His head is kind of lowered, but he's looking at his father and mother. But that's the only time he decided to come through the door. And then the mother looks at Viktor coming through the door. It's interesting how the mother feels the need to comfort her husband when her husband is the one who's beating on her. So maybe that's the motherly thinking in her to comfort him. But of course, when you are a woman at this time in these types of areas, usually the woman is basically a housekeeper. She doesn't really work, and if she works, is maybe maid duty, housekeeping duty. She may be a cook or something like that, but she's not really bringing in a lot of money. So their life is very vulnerable when the man should be the one who's working, and the wife is the one who has to tend to the house and the kids. And when the husband dies, you don't have anything else. You don't have a job. You don't have education. You don't have any other options. And so then, in that case, sometimes women put themselves to work in another type of way. But she is comforting a husband who just let another man hit her. and who didn't come to her rescue, and who also hits her as well. So we have Victor here, just coming through those doors. His mother is basically yelling at him to help, and Victor, with his head held down, is refusing to help. Again, there's nothing in him that pulls out of him some sort of emotion, some sort of sympathy, even mercy, even grace. And maybe he doesn't understand those concepts, right? But still, something human in you should come out and say, okay, let me help you, mom, right? Even fall to the ground and I don't know, hold your mother's hand. But Victor has resigned himself not to be of any use. And one of the things you're going to see with the older Victor is him basically saying that I can be of use to you, to the second boss, right? And that when you become a mob enforcer, it is understood that you are going to be of use. But here, he's refusing to be of use. He's refusing to be of service, which is going to be contrasted with when he goes to talk to Sergey to become a mob enforcer as a child, as you see here. And he's basically wanting to be of use. In many cases, he doesn't want to become his father. He doesn't want to become the person who's lying down on the ground right now, who was just beaten by some footmen, some foot soldiers. He doesn't want to become that person. And maybe in some ways, he looks at Sergey as a person that he could become. It is Sergey who actually is the one who mentors Victor all the way till up until adulthood, and up until he actually betrays Victor. But right here we see him not wanting to be of use. There isn't enough cry in his mother for him to be concerned about, to respond to. And so you often have to wonder then, when he was a baby, did his mother respond to his cries? Because at the end of this lecture, we're going to get into the concept of attachment theory, and that sometimes parents will respond to their children, to their babies, on their own time schedule and not on the baby's time schedule. You have, for secure attachment, a parent who responds appropriately, timely, plays with the child, engages the child. The child can wander off a little bit, crawl away, but turn around and look at the parent and still feel safe and secure, versus an insecure child doesn't have the same relationship with their parent. The parent is available or not available, or is inconsistent in his or her responsiveness. So the way in which you see Victor responding to his parent tells you that she may be reaping what she sowed, what she has sown in him, that she may not have responded to him as a child or to any of his cries when he was younger than what you see right now, and that now she's reaping that fruit in a sense, because it just doesn't make any sense. Even children who may be afraid of their parents will still put on an act, will still put on a face, and still do something to help or whatever. Victor is just not inclined to do anything at all in this moment. So we see Victor walking outside with his head held down. I thought that the actor really does a great job conveying whatever emotion is going on with him. You know, each child has his or her own emotions, and you can tap into your own childhood and think about the times that you've had your head down. So I don't want to give sort of like this universal analysis about the child's head down. It could mean many things. It could mean that Victor wants out of this current life that he has as a child, and a child of two parents who have produced a toxic home. It could be Victor wanting out of this neighborhood, this slum neighborhood. Victor wanting to look and do better in his life, even if he doesn't have a full understanding of that. So you would have to tap into your own childhood to think about what this head down looks for you. I'm quite sure that you have experienced your own vulnerabilities as a child, especially if you were bullied, especially if you dealt with a toxic father or toxic mother. Only you can make a true assessment of what this means for you as you look at Victor walking with his head down. And think about this contrasted, this whole filming image of Victor walking throughout the courtyard with his head down. Think about this contrasted when we see him to running with the hat on, the earphones in his ear, the jogging suit, and that long sort of filming sequence of him just running. He's walking here, but he was running as an adult. And so you're going to see that as well. So Sergey, his center, he is the one with the cigarette. The other two guys are other types of foot soldiers. The two young men who join to become mob enforcers, right? Just little fighters. Look at the scene. The scene is an apartment, but it's definitely more geared towards an adult. It is not necessarily a bachelor's pad or anything like that. Remember the back that we saw of Victor right when he was running through the tunnel? Well, we get his back here as well as a child. And he's forcing himself to make a decision before he truly understands the type of decision that he is making. But in his childlike understanding, he does, I think, for me, I think he doesn't want to be his father. And that's the reason why he's pushing. Because if you think about him being bullied in the courtyard, it is a parallel to his father being bullied by Sergey. And something in him, now that pulls something out of him. He may not be emotionally invested enough into trying to help his mother and help his father in that moment. And he's definitely not going to accept their debt. He's not there to work off their debt, right? But he may not be emotionally invested there, but something in seeing that fight while he was standing behind the doors, seeing Sergey hit his father and his father fall to the ground, and seeing one of the men hit his mother and the mother fall to the ground, something in that dynamic and that visual image pulls at him enough to push him to walk across the courtyard and into another building and into where we see Sergey and the other men, and offer himself to be of use as a mob enforcer. So he's standing here with clothes too big for him, which is ironic because the choice that he is making is a choice that is too big for him. It's too big for him to understand. Because I look at it like this: if this was the best choice for you, why would you feel like you need to quit it later in life? You don't see Sergey really quitting. He's killed by Victor because it was trafficking who sent Sergey to kill Victor. But I don't get the sense that Sergey is willing to leave the mob, leave the mafia, right? So he doesn't feel like the job is too big for him. Now, he does make a point of saying that he had no choice but to come and try to kill Victor. So maybe the job is too big for him in that way. But it's only connected to the idea that he was Victor's mentor. But in this case here, in looking at Victor, this shirt is too big for him. He should have a regular size shirt. And so it is likely his father's shirt. And that's interesting too, because when he takes this job to become a mob enforcer for Sergey and for the mob system as a whole, he doesn't take the money that Sergey is going to give him and give it to his mother. So not only is he not willing to pay the debt for his father, to offer to be of service to pay the debt for his father, but he's not even willing to take any kind of money that he gets from Sergey and try to give it to his mother. Most kids, when they grow up in these toxic environments, they're so wounded in their childhood and abused, and there is so much exposure to domestic violence that they usually feel compelled. They just feel compelled to bring back anything that they have earned. Well, he doesn't really earn any money here. Sergey just gives him a bill, and maybe Sergey is thinking, well, I'm going to give him this bill, and maybe he's going to give it to his family. That's really why he's here. But Victor is resolute in his understanding. I am not here to pay off the debt of my parents, especially my father. So again, this shirt that he has here is very significant. I didn't really think about it because the other shirt that he had on was yellow, and it seemed to be a little fitting for him, even though it was kind of big, but it just seemed to be fitting. But this is clearly a very big shirt that does not fit him, that it falls almost to his knees, and is symbolic of taking on making a choice to put on a garb that is too big for him to wear. In other words, making a choice to become a mob enforcer for a job that's too big for him to wear. So when we see him when we get his back while he's running in the tunnel, there isn't any indication that this choice that he's making is too big for him. But when we look at it from the back, we could assume that having to make this choice is too big for him, because when he kills the interviewer at the end, it is unsettling. It bothers him for a strange reason. And I was wondering if it bothered him because he had to kill somebody in front of Bethesda. He hasn't had to kill anybody, and maybe he had wanted to keep that part of his job secret, and maybe that was the reason. But I think that his unsettling, that emotional unsettling, that psychological unsettling, is really about the fact that he no longer wanted to do the thing that he has been doing for so many years, and that he felt compelled to try to save Bethesda. And so, okay, I'll do this one more time, because when he comes in from an assignment where he was supposed to kill someone and he doesn't kill that person, he puts his gun in the drawer of the nightstand. And I had thought about that, and I said to myself, so he put the gun in there, and I think to myself, if Bethesda had all that opportunity to kill him, she definitely had the opportunity to take that gun and shoot him the whole time, but she never did. So that was more or less about Victor wanting to put away old things, childish things, no longer, because he takes on this role as a child, and throughout his process he's really no different than a child in his thinking. And so when he places the gun in the drawer, it felt like he was wanting to retire the gun, right? In terms of being an assassin. So again, this is significant. This large shirt that he's wearing is too big for him. He can put it on and it can hang on his body, but that's just it. It's hanging on his body. So we see Sergey kind of mocking Victor. Everyone is sort of listening in, and they usually take their cues from Sergey. So if Sergey is laughing, the men laugh. But when Sergey says basically shut up, the men shut up. So that means that Sergey is running this room. He's running this room. He's running the men. He's running the two young guys that you see in the back, and he's running this game. And so when he talks to Victor, it's a little mocking. It's a little jest. It's a little comic relief. It's a number of things, because he's really trying to read Victor. What is he doing down here? Why is he here? And I think to myself, why would you need to read somebody if you know they want to become what you see the young guys behind you wanting to be? which is a mob enforcer. Why isn't there sort of like a formal celebration? Come on in, you can basically be a mob enforcer, you can be all that you want to be. But it's that way of kind of using mocking to set Victor back, to set him back emotionally, to challenge him. You don't really want this, do you? Oh, you're really down here to pay off your father's debt? And Victor's like, no, it's not my debt. And so they kind of laugh about that as well. And then Sergey basically tells him to shut up. And so he's running this game, Sergey. He's running these people around him. He's running his environment, and he's running this table. And so how he interacts with Victor is based on the game as well. So Sergey wants one of the young men to challenge Victor, and so he goes over and he hits Victor in the face in the temple, and so Victor returns with a kick to his stomach and takes him down. So he's already proving himself. It's a little bit of a test for him to prove himself, and it makes sense. You know, what kind of fighting skills do you have? We don't necessarily see any sort of training ground. So whatever skills they have picked up as children is usually on the playground. Someone comes along and hits them or something like that, and they hit the person back. And then, of course, once you enter a certain environment, it is expected that you're going to fight. The goal is not to sit around and look pretty all day. You are going to fight. So that means that Sergey is trying to see just how quick in his understanding that Victor has about what he's actually doing and what he's actually choosing. So it is Sergey here who is offering, once basically Victor has proven himself in kicking the guy, and to me that really wasn't too long of a fighting test or something. I don't know what Sergey is looking for, and I'm not a man. Only a man will sort of understand what Sergey is really looking for. But, you know, I've seen sort of fight scenes where there's like a little bit of a test, and it's longer than that. But, you know, Victor proved himself at the same time. The person that he kicks in the stomach stays down on the ground. So that lets you know that Victor knows how to handle himself. So it's interesting that he doesn't handle himself really with the two bullies at the beginning. That the only thing he really does is once the guy gets up and starts to walk off, Victor kicks him a little bit. But he doesn't do what you see these guys that he does with the young guy here. Basically, you know, his contemporary, in a sense, in the same age range or something like that. He kicks him, and that's the extent of it. And I'm thinking to myself, so why didn't he show these same fighting skills with the two bullies? You know, but a kick is a kick. Whether the kick is him kicking the guy while he's walking away, or him kicking this guy in the stomach and taking him down. But there is a difference. I do believe that this guy that he kicks in the stomach, this young man, that young child that he kicks in the stomach, they're likely around the same age and the same height. Whereas the two bullies, if he kicked him in the stomach, or if he kicked him more than what he did in the courtyard, it might result in a punch to his face, and he might stay on the ground for a long time. But what you see here is Sergey basically accepting Victor into the fold and giving him a bill. And I was wondering why he gave him that bill in that moment. But I just believe that he assumed that Victor is going to take that bill to his mother, and sort of pay some part towards the mother, because later when Sergey kills Victor's father and gives an envelope to the mother with money in it and a lighter, his father's lighter, he's concerned about the mother. He's concerned about her making it. And the interesting thing is, he doesn't put her to work. At least we don't see him putting her to work. Mark, who tells Victor, older Victor, when Victor returns to this slum area after being discovered that he's actually still alive, that she shortly died when Victor left initially. Victor killed the man who owed Sergey money, and his wife and the two daughters were taken away. And then Sergey is the one who took Victor out of the slum area and into the city. And so I'm wondering then, did the mother sort of die of a broken heart a year later? And so he's giving him this bill for whatever reason, payment or something like that. It could be just payment for passing this little test that he does. But I also think it has a lot more resonance with the fact that he wanted Victor to take it to the mother. Because if he didn't, he wouldn't have left the mother any money after he assassinated her husband. So Victor goes back home. The father is sitting in maybe like a rocking chair or lounge chair, and Victor doesn't have a relationship with his father. He doesn't talk to him. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't sit before him. He doesn't really respect him. He goes in, he goes out, and the father is, sort of yelling at him. And he's yelling at him in a sense that you need to respect me, even if he's not necessarily saying those words. He's coming from a standpoint that I am the head of this house and you're going to respect me. But Victor actually has more respect for Sergey, the one who beats his father. And so the father is making his own comments about why Victor needs to say something to him. And Victor looks at him, doesn't have much of a doesn't have much to say. He doesn't say anything. I want to note that this is a different t-shirt from the one that we saw him in when he visited Sergey. So now he's back in his child-like body, in a sense, right? That this t-shirt actually fits him. And this is a t-shirt that fits a child. The father could not take this shirt and put the shirt on himself. So this lets you know that Victor, interestingly enough, has some clue about what to wear, what not to wear. And when he goes down to see and talk to Sergey, he's wearing a shirt that's too big for him. But when he returns, somehow he's changed into a shirt that actually is the right fit for him. And the contrast is that the decision that he's making to become a mob enforcer is way too big for him to actually make that decision. In contract law, children cannot sign contracts without the parents' signature or permission. And so it is Victor operating as an adult when he's wearing that long shirt. But it's now Victor operating as a child when he's among his parents. So it's like he's basically not telling his parents what he has just done. He's coming back in, operating like a child until he can make the transition and leave for good. But I think that was just kind of interesting that the shirt changes when he's in the home, when he is back in the home in front of his parents, and he has to act like a child. He doesn't say anything to them, but he has to act like a child here, because if he had had that shirt on, that long shirt that was likely his father's shirt, if he had had that shirt on, the father would have asked him, what are you doing with that shirt on? What are you doing with my shirt on? Take that shirt off. That shirt doesn't belong to you. It doesn't fit you. It's not right for you. You need to grow into that shirt. Take it off. So the father would have reprimanded him and basically would have given him an instruction, a warning. That would have been like a warning. You are not supposed to wear that shirt. Take that shirt off. It is not the right fit for you. Take it off. You are not a man yet. And that would have been the warning. And that's kind of like the missed opportunity that we're going to discuss later in the film analysis, that the missed opportunity is to receive a warning about making certain choices. The missed opportunity is also understanding that if you go this route of taking money from the mob, from the mafia, and you cannot pay it back, it could cost you your life. And so Victor understands a lot more than we realize. Just in the changing of the shirts, he understands a lot more than we realize. So Victor is lying down in the bed. That cut that you see on his head is from the young guy who hits him in the head, and then Victor kicks him. And so Victor is essentially hearing his father beat his mother. And when he hears that, he sort of turns around in his bed. So he's turning around in discomfort. He's turning around in violence. He's turning around. His ears hear things. His body vibrates when he hears the hits that his daddy takes or he puts on his mother. He's turning his head in ignoring. And I believe that Victor's father gets upset with the idea that Victor doesn't respect him as the man of the house, and then takes it out on the wife. He was going to beat the wife regardless, because he's been beating the wife. But I think that exchange that he had with Victor, when Victor did not recognize or respect him in that moment as he was talking, I think that was sort of like the fuel that pushed him to take his belt and beat his wife. So he's looking, we're going to see in a flashback later the belt and how he is beating his wife. But what we're seeing here is maybe his disgust, the feelings that he have for the woman, for the wife. And a lot of times it's more or less projection that they really need to beat themselves. But it's much easier to take a target and beat that target, right? Versus maybe taking their hand and hitting their hand in a wall, punching a hole in a wall, or going to the gym and punching something or whatever. They would rather beat something. Even if they have to hear the cries of the person, somehow they just ignore it in their mind. It doesn't matter to them. That in that moment, they got to express their anger. They have to express their disgust about their life, about their life's choices. So when did he start beating his wife? And I don't know if this is his wife. I'm just assuming it is his wife. But what is his narrative history? People don't get up one day and just begin beating somebody. Again, he must have seen this in his childhood. He must have seen his own father beat his mother. And so you do what you know. And this face that he has is really a face that should be turned inward. That it is him who has caused the disorder in a situation. Women usually are not really permitted to work in these types of environments. So that means it is up to him to go to work. But we don't see him going to work. All we see is him being beaten up by Sergey and his other foot soldiers. Well, and the other foot soldiers, because this man here owes money. But we don't see him working. We don't see him making money. We don't see him leaving the house. He's in the house or he's in the hallway. But we don't see much of anything. Now, we don't see him drinking. I can't remember if he was smoking. So we don't see any sort of vices that keep him bound. So maybe he's just bound because he just don't know how to do anything but be lazy, not work for anything, not do anything, not even be an enforcer. The irony is that he doesn't have any money to pay back the debt, but he doesn't go down to Sergey himself and offer himself to be of use to pay down the debt. That's interesting that it is his son who has some insight about the situation that says, okay, I don't want to become you, so I'm just going to offer myself, put myself to use, and offer myself to be of use and be put to work and become a mob enforcer. But he's too lazy even to go the criminal route, to become a mob enforcer. But he's later assassinated by Sergey. And so we see the mother. This camera angle is basically Victor looking at his mother on the ground, I mean on the floor, and she's bloodied, and we're going to get a closer view of her back. And remember the scars that we see on Bethesda, that the women are scarred. They're not only emotionally scarred and psychologically scarred and spiritually scarred, but they are physically scarred. We see Bethesda's scars have healed, but we can tell that those scars have been there for a very long time. Usually scars can heal a little bit to the point that they are not noticeable, but these scars have been scars that have been ongoing. So if she was beaten or mistreated in any way, it was consistent and repetitive. In the same way that you see here, this wife, it is consistent and repetitive. But we don't see Victor going into his mother and laying down with her and holding her hand and just being there for her. So she's all alone. She got male energy in the house, and no male energy is there to actually support her and cover her and protect her. I didn't realize that Victor had actually gone into the mother and was sort of putting his hands on her wounds. And this hand that you see is the same hand that he's going to use as an adult to look at Bethesda's wounds. So I guess in some ways he is responding to his mother. And these wounds are just horrific. They're just horrific. Even in just actors looking at this from a filmmaker's point of view, to create these wounds takes a little bit of psychology. But these wounds, if these wounds could talk, what would they say? If these wounds gave the mother voice, the only voice that we hear of the mother is her yelling. That's it. But we don't hear much more of her, who she is, where she comes from. We don't get any kind of narrative history about her. So we have to do a lot of assuming. And this is Victor placing his hands on his mother's back. So yes, he does respond to her. So I have to take that back, that he does respond to her. But he eventually leaves her as well. The irony is that when he flashes back to this scene with his mother, when he's in a restaurant and he's contemplating whether he should go back and help Bethesda, who he doesn't know is Bethesda. It is this scene here that pushes him. He can't help his mother here, but he could help Bethesda. And that's what he eventually ends up doing. It's interesting, though. It might have been better for him to continue helping his mother and staying within this environment than to become a mob enforcer. But by the time he gets to this point, he's already made the decision to become a mob enforcer. And so the father is out here in the hallway. He's always out in the hallway. And so he's out in the hallway, and Sergey here, this image, this shadow image is actually Sergey, and he's asking for the money, and he still doesn't have the money. He's going to sort of throw something at Sergey, some little bit of money or whatever, and then the lighter, and Sergey is going to pick up the lighter and I guess the money. And I don't know if it's the same money that he gives to the wife, but regardless, he gives her money. And so Sergey is pulling out a gun as a way to enforce the guy to give the money that he owes. And you know, this is really actually The gun here is significant only in the sense that Sergey really doesn't use it. He just pulls it out, and it's enough to spark some sort of flight in the father. But it's interesting how guns are used within this film. When Victor pulls out a gun, he intends to use it, period. Whether he is a child using it or whether he is an adult mob enforcer using it. But Sergey is a little different. The way he holds a gun doesn't seem like it's really intentional. He's just using it to use it. Even when Franco, Victor, and Sergey are meeting with someone for a drug exchange, Sergey is not holding a gun. Of course, it makes sense that Victor is holding a gun because he's like security in that moment. But as soon as Franco asks Victor to give him the gun, yells at him to give him the gun, you would think that Sergey would immediately place his hand on his gun, but he doesn't. So I wonder why Sergey even has a gun. Why does he even care to have a gun? I think it's just to threaten. I'm not quite sure he's as intentional in his desires. And so he picks up the lighter that the father throws, and that lighter is going to be significant because it's the same lighter that he's going to place in an envelope with some money and leave with the mother. So the mother is sitting here like any victim of domestic violence. They are just as resolute in their understanding about the situation and their desire to stay. They may feel stuck, or they may feel like this is what I have to do. I have no other choice. Remember, you will have different characters saying, I have no other choice. I don't have a choice. And so in some regard, it is true because, like I say, these women do not go out and work. And if they do, it's minor housekeeping, maid work. They don't really go out to sort of like jobs like a man does. And all we know that this is the slums, and we don't know the workforce, the economy of the situation. We don't know anything like that. We do know that people are joining to become mob enforcers, right? So she's sitting here, she's been beaten, been hurt, and there isn't anything in her we don't see her cleaning herself. We don't see her going into a shower. We don't see her changing her clothes. I'm not sure if this is the same outfit that she had on when her husband was beating her, but her face says it all. Her face is just as stone-faced and blank-faced as her son's. And so there's a knock at the door. She goes to the door and she retrieves this envelope that's going to have money in it and the lighter. And she's confused by the whole thing, but once she sees the lighter, she understands that her husband has been assassinated. So that means this man that has been beating her is not coming back home. That alone is a shock, because if a person has been schooling you in their university of abuse, that's all you understand. That's all you know. You're going to have to now rebuild your life apart from the person who's been beating you, when really that's all you've known. They might have met when they were younger. He might have been beating her from the time they were younger and married. And so it's interesting that she's wearing a t-shirt that works for her, that supports her, but she's living within a system that doesn't support her. The irony is, though, the system doesn't support her, but the mob system does. And it's the same system that Sergey Sergey is really not a person who uh, supports his own word. Because remember what he said, that if you don't give me my money, I'm going to put your wife to work. I'm going to put her to work. Well, he doesn't put her to work. So there's a challenge. We have to challenge um, his thinking, his authority, because Sergey is not who he really seems to be. He's not as an enforcer as much as he claims to be. So she sees the lighter. She realizes what it means. And this is the same outfit. So she hasn't gotten out of this outfit. She hasn't gotten out of this blouse. This blouse that is bloody. That means she hasn't been into a mirror. She hasn't looked at her back. She hasn't. I'm quite sure that the blood was so thick that is stuck to her back, and there isn't anything in her that says I got to get out of this blouse. And we're not going to see her development. Basically, what we see her doing here, crying, this is basically the end of her development, because she's going to die a year later after Viktor is taken out of town. But it's interesting that this shirt is her covering. She cannot get any other covering from her husband, and the only covering that is temporary is from Sergey, or the mob enforcer system. And this is just the extent. And her son is going to leave her, so she's going to be left all alone in this one apartment with nobody, no man, no understanding of how to get herself out of the system, no job, nothing at all. And this is her despair. She's likely going to go into this house, lay down on the bed, and basically die. And Viktor hears his mother crying and he doesn't know what it is, but he just hears her crying. And he's used to hearing her cry. So there's no sense in really giving way to any kind of emotion, because this is what he's used to. This is what he's accustomed to. This is what he understands as a young boy. And so Viktor is now with Sergey. He's made his decision. He hasn't fully left the home yet, but he's made his decision. The way Sergey is pulling at him is like a father. Sergey is responsible for killing his father, for assassinating his father. And now Viktor is more inclined to respect Sergey's authority than he is inclined to respect his father's authority. So there's a changing of authorities. Once he decides to make himself abusive, become a mob enforcer, he already changed authorities. That's why he doesn't respect his father when he's standing in the kitchen. And so he's changing authorities. Sergey has now welcomed him. First he gave him a bill, and now he's welcoming him by putting his hand around his head, like you would see a father do. And so Viktor has been given a package, and a package, inside the package is a gun. And Viktor is now feeling the weight of that gun. You know, he's holding a gun, he's looking at the gun, and holding a gun and looking at the gun is really looking at his decisions, right? But it's also looking at his setback, because once he uses that gun, he sets himself back. He sets himself back in his overall mental development, social development, psychological development, spiritual development, once he shoots that gun. And right now, to me, in some ways, he's at a crossroads moment. He may have a crossroads moment much later, but this is the time to make a decision and say, no, I don't want to go this route. But it's too late. Once you are basically in this system, it's hard to get out. It's like blood in, blood out. So that little fight that he had, that little test that he had, was a way of jumping in, right? If we were looking at gang terminology. And so now this is basically his first assignment, right? The first with the guy that he kicks was a test. This is now a first assignment, his first task. So the two guys that you see in the background that I noted earlier were the two bullies initially who were bullying him in the courtyard. So Victor has now changed positions. He was the one down on the ground being bullied and being choked by those two guys. Now, as a mob enforcer, as a special maybe surrogate of Sergey, he's now in charge of them. So when he moves from one position to another, he crosses positions. In the same way that he was crossing the courtyard with his head down to go see Sergey, he's now crossing positions. And they stand there for a while as he walked down the stairs. It's not like they're putting on an act, and then once he gets down the stairs and midway, they go on ahead and change. No, they stand in that position with their head down for a long while until he is fully out of view. So he's completely changed positions. So now he's entering the home of a family. This is the wife of that family, and she welcomes him in. Interestingly enough, she don't know him. For her to welcome somebody in without knowing the person, she doesn't know if the person is a friend of her daughter's or if the person is a friend of anybody in that home, but she opens the door willingly and lets him walk in. All right, like, subscribe, and visit. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for more discussions. You can visit my YouTube channel for further film analysis. It's Favorites Film Analysis as the title of the channel. You can always send me an email and ask me a question, reginayfavorites@yahoo.com. My Overcoming Setback 5 Keys for Entering and Exiting Correction book will become available around October 2021. I'm still doing some editing. The book does not focus on film analyses, but I use the content that I created for the book to support my my perceptions of setback used as a theme in select films. So when the book becomes available, I will send out a notification, video, audio. Thank you very much for visiting the channel.